Hi, I'm Bob. Thank you very much for answering all the exercises with me. We will complete solving the problems for this chapter today. I used the textbook Microeconomics Theory and Applications with Calculus, the 5th edition by Professor Jeffrey Perloff. A link to an Introductory Microeconomics course can be found in the description below. Let's answer exercise 6.7. Show that if the importing country faces an upward sloping foreign supply curve, a tariff may raise welfare in the importing country. We review the free trade case where the world supply is horizontal. The tariff causes a deadweight loss of the area of C plus E in this case. Now we assume that the world supply curve is upward sloping. The tariff shifts the world supply curve upward by the amount of the tariff. We will examine the welfare change before and after the tariff is imposed. We write the areas in a table. The equilibrium is E1 in the free trade case. The domestic consumer surplus in the free trade case is A plus B plus C plus D. With an upward sloping world supply, foreign producers probably supply all products for each price level. So the domestic producer surplus is zero. The social welfare equals the domestic consumer surplus. After imposing the tariff, the market equilibrium is E2. The domestic consumer surplus reduces to the area of A. The domestic producer surplus is still zero. The government collects a tariff revenue equal to the area of C plus E. It equals the tariff per unit times the quantity of imports. So, the social welfare, measured as the sum of consumer surplus, producer surplus, and tariff revenue, is A plus C plus E. The change in the welfare is E minus B minus D. It could be positive. It means that the tariff may raise welfare in the importing countries. Let's solve exercise 6.8. Given that the world supply curve is horizontal at the world price for a given good, can a subsidy on imports raise welfare in the importing country? Explain your answer. The answer is no. The graph shows that the equilibrium is E1 with free trade when the world supply is horizontal. The domestic consumer surplus is the area of A plus B. The domestic producer surplus is C plus D plus G. So the social welfare is A plus B plus C plus D plus G. If the government subsidizes the imported goods, it lowers the price and the world supply line shifts downward by the amount of the subsidy. The domestic market equilibrium is E2, where the domestic demand curve intersects the world supply curve with the subsidy. The domestic consumer surplus increases to A plus B plus C plus D plus E. The domestic consumers benefit from the subsidy. The domestic producers lose because the domestic producer surplus falls by the area of C plus D. The government pays the subsidy equal to the subsidy per unit times the quantity of imports. It is the area of D plus E plus F. The government subsidy is a negative component of the social welfare. We can calculate the change in welfare after the subsidy. It is minus D plus F. The direct loss to society is the two triangles, D plus F. If we compare the subsidy case to the tariff case in figure 9.7 in the textbook, we find that both lead to direct loss. The direct loss areas are different but quite similar. Let's go to exercise 6.9. After Mexico signed the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States in 1994, corn imports from the United States doubled within a year, and today U.S. imports make up nearly one-third of the corn consumed in Mexico. The U.S. government subsidizes corn production to the tune of $10 billion a year. According to the researcher, the 2002 U.S. cost of production was $3.08 per bushel, but the export price was $2.69 per bushel, with the difference reflecting an export subsidy of 39 cents per bushel. The United States exported 5.3 metric tons. Use graph to show the effect of such a subsidy on the welfare of various groups and on government expenditures in the United States and Mexico. We will find the changes in consumer surplus, producer surplus, and welfare before and after the subsidy. In the Mexican market, the equilibrium is even before the U.S. government subsidizes the corn exports. The equilibrium becomes E2 after the subsidy. The equilibrium price falls from $3.08 to $2.69 per bushel. We list the Mexican consumer surplus, producer surplus, and welfare in a table. Mexican consumer surplus is A plus B without the subsidy. It increases to A plus B plus C plus D plus E after subsidy. Mexican consumers benefit from the lower price, but Mexican producers lose by the area of C plus D. They supply fewer goods to the domestic market after the U.S. government subsidizes the exports to Mexico. The Mexican society as a whole benefits from the subsidy. The Mexican welfare, measured by the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus, rises by the area of E. Next, we look at the U.S. market. Suppose the U.S. supply curve is horizontal in the long run. The subsidy lowers the firm's average cost and attracts more firms to enter the market. Therefore, the firms make zero economic profit in the long run. So, the U.S. producer surplus is unchanged after the subsidy on exports. The U.S. consumer surplus is also unchanged because the subsidy is on exports only, and it has no effect on the domestic market. The U.S. government pays the subsidy of the area D plus E plus F. It equals the subsidy per unit times the amount of exports to Mexico. The change in the U.S. welfare is minus D plus E plus F. We find that the Mexican market has a positive welfare change of E, but the U.S. market has a negative welfare change of D plus E plus F. Let's answer exercise 6.10. In the first quarter of 2013, the world price for raw sugar, 24 cents per pound, was about 79% of the domestic price, 29 cents per pound, because of quotas and tariffs on sugar imports. Consequently, American-made corn sweeteners can be profitably sold domestically. A decade ago, the U.S. Commerce Department estimated that the quotas and price support reduce American welfare by about $3 billion a year. So each dollar of Archer Daniels Midland's profit from selling U.S. sugar costs Americans about $10. Model the effects of a quota on sugar in both the sugar and corn sweetener markets. Suppose the government sets a quota on imports of sugars. The debit loss is the area of A. It is $3 billion a year. The domestic producer surplus is the area of B plus C. It is about 1/10 of A, according to this exercise. Let's find answers to exercise 6.11. During the Napoleonic Wars, Britain blockaded North America, seizing U.S. vessels and cargo and imprisoning sailors. At President Thomas Jefferson's request, Congress imposed a nearly complete, perhaps 80%, embargo on international commerce from December 1807 to March 1809. Just before the embargo, exports were about 13% of the U.S. GNP. Due to the embargo, U.S. consumers could not find acceptable substitutes for manufactured goods from Europe, and producers could not sell farm produce and other goods for as much as in Europe. According to the researcher, the welfare cost of the embargo was at least 8% of the GNP in 1907. Use graphs to show the effects of the embargo on a market for an exported good and one for an imported good. Show the change in equilibria and the welfare effects on consumers and firms. In the market for imported goods, the equilibrium is even without embargo. It is the intersection of the domestic demand curve and the supply curve S1. S1 is the supply curve under free trade. It is the part of the domestic supply below the world price, and then horizontal at the world price. The equilibrium is E2 with the embargo. It is the intersection of the domestic demand curve and the supply curve S2. The market price increases and the quantity reduces. The consumer surplus falls, but the domestic producers benefit from the embargo. The society as a whole loses. The debit loss to society is the area of C. Next, we examine the market for exported goods. Suppose the world price of the exports is higher than the domestic price. The market equilibrium is even without the embargo. The consumer surplus is A, and the producer surplus is B plus C plus D, because the producers not only sell goods domestically but also abroad. After the embargo, the market equilibrium is E2. The market price falls. The producers lose sales in the world market, but the domestic consumers purchase more at a lower price. The consumers benefit from it, but the producers lose more, and the welfare falls by the area of C. Let's solve exercise 6.12. A government is considering a quota and a tariff, both of which will reduce imports by the same amount. Why might the government prefer one of these policies to the other? The government prefers a tariff to a quota because the welfare loss is larger under the quota than the tariff. The domestic market equilibrium is E after the tariff is imposed. E is the intersection of the domestic demand curve D and the supply curve with a tariff S3. From previous exercises, we know that the debit loss to society is the area of A plus C, the two small triangle areas. If the government uses a quota to reduce imports by the same amount, the supply curve is still S3, but the government collects no revenue. The debit loss rises to A plus B plus C. Under both policies, the consumer surplus and producer surplus changes are the same, but the government earns revenue only from the tariff. Let's jump to the challenge of the chapter. Here is exercise 7.1. In 2002, Los Angeles imposed a ban on new billboards. Owners of existing billboards did not oppose the ban. Why? What are the implications of the ban for producer surplus, consumer surplus, and welfare? Who are the producers and consumers in your analysis? How else does the ban affect welfare in Los Angeles? Without new billboards, after the ban is imposed, the supply curve is S1. The market equilibrium is E1. The consumer surplus is A. The existing producer surplus is B plus D. Without the ban, unlimited new billboards could enter the market, so the new supply curve could become S2. The consumer surplus is A plus B plus C, while the existing producer surplus falls to D. The existing billboard owners welcome the ban because their producer surplus increases by B with the ban. The billboard owners are the producers, and the billboard users are the consumers. The welfare falls by C after the ban is imposed. Let's find answers to exercise 7.2. As the challenge mentions, several state governments issued a fixed number of liquor licenses that are good forever but allow the holder of a license to resell them. Alternatively, the government could charge a high enough license fee that firms buy the same number of licenses currently issued. Use figures to compare and contrast the equilibrium under each of these approaches. Discuss who wins and who loses under each plan, considering consumers, restaurant owners, the original holders of a license, and society. With the fixed number of liquor licenses, the supply curve is S2. The market equilibrium is E2. It creates a producer surplus equal to the area B. When the license holders resell the licenses, they capture the producer surplus of B. The new license holders earn zero producer surplus because their minimum average cost rises to P2. If the government charges a higher license fee so that the firm's minimum average cost is P2, then the market equilibrium is also E2. The number of licenses is also N2. the same as the first approach. In this case, the potential producer surplus of B goes to the government. Compared to no license, both approaches lead to a deadweight loss equal to the area of C. Consumer surplus is the same, the area for A. The producer surplus B goes to the original holders in the first approach, while it goes to the government in the second approach. Thank you very much for solving all the exercises with me today. See you soon in the next chapter. Goodbye. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.